What's up, internet? Riley Evans here again, back at you with another video. Thank you so much for stopping by to the channel, learning about all things health, fitness, nutrition related from a 100% body positive perspective. I'm disgusting right now. I'm not even a human. I just came back from a run. As a side note, unrelated to the video, it's getting hot out there, y'all, so hydrate. In all seriousness, no, you gotta make sure if you're doing cardio outside, drink so much water, all the water beforehand, because it's much easier to pre-hydrate than it is to rehydrate, and you don't have to deal with all of those nasty, mild dehydration symptoms. Do you like Animal Crossing? I like Animal Crossing. It's a fun game, relaxing way to spend time with people that you love, who also own Nintendo Switches all over your city or the country or the world during this time where we're not able to be together as much as we like physically. Problem with Animal Crossing, however, is frankly kind of addictive. And you know what? If you think you're the only person who sat down for a 10-12 hour straight day of fishing and catching bugs and making bells, then you're wrong. Because we've all done it. We've all done it for 10-12 hours straight, stopping only for the basic necessities of life, aka food, more food, occasionally water. But what if I told you you could get in a legitimate workout session? A workout session that got your heart rate going, got some of your muscles stimulated, all from the comfort of close proximity to your couch, without ever, at any point in time, having to actually stop playing Animal Crossing. Riley, don't tease me with these things. It's not possible. It can't be done. Well, that's where you're wrong. Because today's video is exactly that. I am going to bring you through a full lower body workout, because obviously you need your hands and your arms in order to continue to play Animal Crossing. So it's going to be lower body focused. A full lower body workout with a major compound movement, a secondary compound movement, and 3 accessory exercises that are going to allow you to get your pump on, get your sweat on, get your heart rate up, and keep on fishing. But Riley, I'm that guy. You remember me from last week? I just got my gym membership 2 weeks before quarantine. Just started my fitness journey. I don't have fancy equipment. I don't have dumbbells. I don't have bands. I don't have any of that fun stuff. There's no way that I could possibly get a good workout in while playing Animal Crossing. You're still wrong. Let me show you for a second, real quick. We're gonna avoid showing you anything in my messy apartment, but I am gonna show you the one and only implement that you're gonna need for this workout. Jesus Christ, it's heavy. Ooh, check this out. A backpack. That's all you're gonna need. Because what you can do, let's say you're that new person to fitness and you haven't necessarily acquired any of the equipment that a lot of us would be using in our home training. If you have a backpack that you don't particularly care about, you can turn that into as heavy a resistance as any dumbbell, any resistance band you're gonna be able to find on the open market. All you really have to do is take this backpack and fill it up with things you have around your house, books, cans, bottles of water. I personally have a bunch of books and yes, dumbbells, but you don't need it. Anything that provides a significant, substantial, solid weight is gonna do exactly what we need to do for the purposes of this workout. Okay, we got the switch. Now, for the purpose of this workout, the assumption is that you are holding the switch in your hands as opposed to playing it using the controllers on the television, because we want to be light inclusive. Some people don't have $400 to drop on the whole switch, and you know what? They still want to play Animal Crossing, so get the Switch Lite. So the assumption is that you got the Switch, and in order to play Animal Crossing, you required the Switch to be in both hands, operate the full spectrum of controls and activities that you were capable of doing. Over the course of this workout, we're gonna hit a primary compound lift, a secondary compound lift, and then a few accessories. This is gonna be a full lower body workout. So at some point during the entirety of the session, we're gonna be hitting our quads, our glutes, our hamstrings, and our calves. Furthermore, because the amount of weight that each individual person is going to not only be able to handle, but also even have on hand in the first place, I am going to give you an approximate number of sets. But we're going to be using what's called reps in reserve. Essentially what's going to happen is I'm going to give you a number of reps in reserve, and you're going to continue to do the exercise during the set until you think you have that many reps left in the tank. For example, on the first exercise in the first set is going to be to approximately an RIR, reps in reserve, of 2. So you're going to keep pumping out that movement until you believe that you can only do 2 more, at which point the set is over, because we don't want to be pushing every set to failure, because that is going to tax our muscles to the point where if you're not somebody who's acclimatized to training like this, you're going to need an extended period of time to recover before you can actually train those muscles again. Over the course of time, that's going to inhibit you from being able to achieve the same results that you would have if you just left a couple reps in the tank at the end of the set, thus reducing your overall recovery time required. So let's get started! Okay. So the first lower body movement we're going to be doing, our primary compound movement, is arguably the most effective lower body movement in the entire training repertoire, and that is the squat. In this case, we're going to be doing backpack box squats. So obviously, as you can see, the straps around my shoulders, I have the backpack on my back. It is loaded with as much weight as I can possibly put in it. This is because the squat is a super efficient movement that allows you to lift a tremendous amount of weight. So we're gonna give it everything that we have. The target muscles for the squat are going to be your quads, which you're training by knee extension, which is the extending of the knees from a bent position to a straight position, as well as your glutes through hip extension, which is the extending of your hips from a bent position to a straight position as well. The difference between a box squat and a regular squat is that as opposed to squatting down to full comfortable depth, you're gonna stop yourself at around parallel wherever you have your box, or in this case obviously your couch, set up. You can see there's an extra pillow on the couch behind me. That's because the couch is a little lower than where I would normally like to have a box be set up when you're doing squats. Now, when you're executing the movement, 2 things I want you to be thinking of during the exercise are A, maintaining a solid contracted core to make sure that your back isn't hunching over or curving over to compensate for the weight. The second is I want you to be really mindful of your tempo. I want you to go down your eccentric portion where the muscles are stretching out. I want you to go down at about a 1 Mississippi count in order to hit your box. And then I want you to explode up during your concentric, the actual contraction portion of the motion, with maximal force output. Research shows that the most effective way to gain hypertrophy during a given motion is throughout the full range of the motion, control your eccentric portion and allow your muscles to stretch under load, and then give maximum force and output during your concentric contraction. And the most important information for our purposes is the fact that this motion leaves both of your hands, once the backpack is on, fully available to play Animal Crossing. So let's get it started. So that's set number 1. Something that more advanced trainees might want to keep in mind is the fact that in reality, when you're lifting loads of this magnitude, your cardiovascular system, your heart and your lungs, might actually give out before your actual muscular system, your quads and your glutes, hit that 2 RIR that we set. In that case, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add more sets and continue to fatigue your quads and your glutes until such a point that you actually hit approximately 2 RIR in this exercise. Another thing to keep in mind with all compound motions is I want you to pay attention to which muscle groups you feel the most. The great thing about compound motions is the fact that they work multiple muscle groups simultaneously through the manipulation and the movement of multiple joints. However, Nobody has a completely equal strength curve throughout the entirety of their musculature, and when you're working with multiple muscle groups in one exercise, your body is going to have a tendency to compensate, allowing the stronger muscle groups to take over more of the motion than the weaker ones. I want you to pay attention to which muscle groups really feel the burn. For me, when we're working with my quads and my glutes, it's my quads which dominate the motion and take on the brunt of the force. One way that you can sort of try to even that out and get the other muscle group involved is each time you're doing a repetition, consciously think about contracting the weaker muscle group. For me, it's my glutes. So I gotta really squeeze consciously my butt in order to get my glutes involved on that concentric on the way up. So in terms of set count, for beginners, I'd like to see you starting at around 3 sets, nothing crazy. Eventually you'll be able to work your way up to doing more, but we don't want to overly tax you at this time. 3 sets to that 2 RIR mark, and if you're an intermediate or more advanced trainee, like I said, just continue to do reps until your cardio system gives out, and then continue to do sets until you fatigue to the point where you actually hit that 2 RIR point. Is it the most efficient way to work out? No, but working out at home with improvised equipment also isn't the most efficient way to do this either. So we're working with what we have, and eventually we're gonna get to those isolation accessory movements that are only working one joint, and in that case, the weight that you have available to you is gonna be a lot more efficient for those movements. Oh, the dumbbell just smashed me on the hip. Call 911. I'm gonna need help. I need help. Somebody help me. I'm in position right now for our second movement, which is going to be a hip thrust. Now the hip thrust works similar muscle groups to the squat in terms of it being somewhat a function of knee extension as well as a function of hip extension, but unlike the squat, which tends to favor the quadriceps because you're extending your knees at a greater angle than you are extending your hips, the hip thrust, by definition of course of its name, has a much greater angular extension of hips than it does to your knees. So it's really gonna hammer those glutes if you weren't able to focus them very well during the squats. As you can see, I'm on the floor, Nintendo Switch in hand, with my weighted backpack, still for me weighted maximally, and what you're really gonna wanna do is essentially plant your feet with your knees like this and focus on contracting your glutes and allowing them to flatten out your hips. You position your shoulders and your back against the couch or something that's not going to move, and you try to make sure you have the surest footing as possible in order to make sure that your knees stay stagnant, and all you're really thinking about is that primary movement of extending your hips under load and contracting your glutes. So, because this is such a hip focused movement, some people will also feel their hamstrings getting into play here. There's nothing wrong with that, as long as you're still feeling a contraction and burn primarily in your glutes. The quadricep involvement is really secondary in this exercise. And again, ideally what I'd like you to do, beginners, 3 sets again, 2 RIR, and then intermediate and advanced lifties, go until your cardio runs out or until you hit 2 RIR. Because there's less overall body movement during the course of the hip thrust as opposed to the squat, it's not as taxing on your cardiovascular system, so it will be easier for even more advanced trainees, should they have anything significant in the form of weight, to continue to push out reps until they've hit the target intensity. So now we're moving on to our first isolation or accessory movement. These movements are more targeted towards isolating a particular muscle group and allowing you to ensure that you're getting the appropriate weekly volume to continue to make progress. What we're doing here is an improvised backpack leg extension in order to target our quads. what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna sit down your couch, push yourself as far back in so that the back of your calves is touching the edge of your couch. You wanna be sitting as far back as possible in order to make sure that you're not also having to stabilize your hips while you're doing the movement, and you can just focus on doing that knee extension, which is gonna train the quadriceps most effectively. You are probably, for most of you, going to wanna drop some of the weight that you have in the bag from what you were doing during the compound exercises, because when you're doing isolation lifts, you're just not as strong in these movements in these positions. You slide the straps of your backpack around the backs of your legs and you balance the backpack with whatever weight you still have in it. While you're playing Animal Crossing, I want you to lean back into the couch and just slowly extend . So a couple things that I came to the conclusion of during that set. We're gonna go through a second one. Hopefully that one would be more effective. If you have, like me, longer legs, I'm about 6'1", you may want to put 1 or even 2 pillows right under your thighs, right up where they connect to the knees, in order to make sure that you have space to actually go through that full knee extension range of motion before your feet hit the ground. So as you can see, that was a lot smoother when I put something under my knees. The reason for that is that putting something under my knees, A, elevated my feet off the floor to the point that they weren't dragging it all through the range of motion that I was trying to get, and B, because elevating your knees when you're doing a leg extension actually increases the range of motion that you're able to get, because you can tuck your knees a little farther under. I actually, some of you might have noticed, I used a foam roller to put under my knees as opposed to pillows, just because it's a little more solid, so it doesn't squish into the couch as much as the pillows would have. But I was using the pillows earlier before I remembered that I had this, and you can definitely get very good separation from the floor with your feet and that increased range of motion if you just tuck pillows underneath. So you're gonna do 3 or 4 sets of those leg extensions, sort of feel it out. This time you're gonna go a little closer to failure. We're talking probably a reps in reserve 1. So moving on to the hamstrings, putting a hamstring exercise into this particular workout was a little more difficult. Now what I did end up settling on is a seated hamstring curl iso hold. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna drop this backpack that you're still using, doesn't matter how it's loaded at this point, down at your feet, right at the edge of your couch or chair, or whatever you're sitting in order to create a gap, some separation between the edge of the couch and where your feet are gonna be. And what you're gonna do is you are going to do an iso hold that's gonna tax your hamstrings. What an iso hold is, it's essentially an isolation hold on again. Now, what an iso hold is that rather than taking your rather than taking your muscles through a full range of motion with a full concentric and eccentric phase, what you're going to be doing is putting the joint, in this case the knees, because your hamstrings are responsible for knee flexion. You're going to be putting that joint in a position where you can't actually go through the range of motion and are pushing against an immovable object. In this case, the backpack up against the couch, up against the wall. So, full disclosure, any research is going to tell you that an iso hold in and of itself is not as effective in building muscle or building strength as going through a full range of motion with the muscle being under load. However, given the circumstances that we're in, I thought it was fair for me to have one sort of suboptimal exercise. One thing that I would recommend, just as a sort of form cue for this, is to try and make sure toes are pointed down, because that takes your calves out of the motion and allows you to isolate your hamstrings. And again, similar to the leg extension, you're gonna do 3 or 4 of those, kind of feel it out. until the point where you can actively see that even on the outset of the motion, even when you're just starting your contraction, you're substantially weaker and more fatigued than you were when you started out in your first set. Final exercise. We are doing seated backpack calf raises. I actually reloaded all of my original weight back into the backpack. So if you want to be a little more convenient and have a little less disruption to your Animal Crossing pleasure, then you can actually take the calf raise and move it to third in the order of exercises before the leg extension. The final 3 movements of this workout can be interchanged in whatever order you like. It's not super essential that they be in the order that I've laid them out here. So if you would like to do the calf raises first out of those 3 because it requires more weight in the bag, and then take that weight out for the final 2, that's totally an option you can have. Anything to allow you, my glorious, beautiful viewership, the least infringement upon your fishing and bug catching and bell making, house decorating pleasure. How does the calf raise work? Well, the primary goal and the function of the calves are plantar flexion, which is the pointing down of the toes. In order to do that, I don't know, you can just see the ends of it right here in the camera. I placed a book on the floor so that I could put my toes up on it and thus, through the range of motion, allow myself further latitude to drop my heel, flex my foot even further than the ground would allow me to do, and then extend my toes through a full range of motion. Now, if you wanted to get really fancy to make this more difficult, you could do these one leg at a time, but that would probably require more balance and more concentration to balance this uneven resistance on one leg as opposed to 2, so it might interfere with your gameplay. And we all know what the priority is here. I'm also going to pull this foam roller back out again. I'm going to sit on it right at the edge of the couch, just again to give myself a little more latitude to get into a fuller range of motion. If you have pillows or something similar available to you, I would also recommend sitting on those again, just to make sure that you have the full latitude of motion available to you. So I just went through the first set, and although I made the point about the calves having a short range of motion and as such the ability to handle a large amount of weight, but honestly, I'm telling you, if you are incredibly deliberate about making sure that you go through that full range of plantar flexion very slowly, very deliberately, you will be surprised how quickly you can start feeling a burn even with a limited amount of weight, especially if you do decide to do it one leg at a time. Now for the sets, again, we're gonna do 3 to 4 sets depending on how we're feeling. And in terms of the intensity, we're actually going to take these pretty much to failure, or essentially until you can't handle the burn anymore. The calves have been found in the general population to have a higher percentage of slow twitch muscle fibers, which means that they can handle a lot of volume and still be able to recover. So you don't have to be so worried about pushing your calves hard in terms of the intensity and having them not be able to turn around and recover. Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoy having a full lower body workout routine that can genuinely get you results over a period of time without taking you away from everybody's new favorite Nintendo Switch game, mine included. Please, if you enjoyed this workout, if you got anything out of this video, take a minute, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share it to somebody else who also spends 10 to 12 hours a day playing Animal Farm. Don't lie to me, you know at least 10 of them. I've been Riley Evans. Thank you so much again for joining me on my channel, and I will see you in the next video. Love ya! Mwah.